if you haven't heard this little public service announcement, if my panelists, if y'all could keep y'all's video on, but everyone else, if you can turn your video off, that would be great. And thank y'all for joining. So we will have a pretty intimate setting today. Several of my sisters and brothers in the state of Texas are still struggling with electricity. I live in Houston, and it has been a dogfight all week. But we are excited to have this esteemed panel group with us today. And so everyone that's invited to this are folks that have we know and have some relationship with IMC Culture. And we try to host these just to keep the conversation going with some of the work that we support our clients with. And we're always looking to kind of hear the latest and greatest thoughts from subject matter experts across industries, across specialties. And so we certainly thank and appreciate y'all for joining today. We'll start out with introductions. And again, I'm Benjamin Foster. I know most of you, have worked with most of you. So I'm the president of IMC Culture. We're a management consulting firm that specialize in some of your traditional human capital services. So employee engagement, talent management, leadership development. We also do quite a bit of work in diversity and inclusion, and we'll also support our clients with their community engagement strategy. I am very grateful for my family. This week has been an amazing week. As I mentioned, I live in Houston. We went 36 hours from like Sunday night to, I guess it was Tuesday night or Wednesday without electricity. And at one point, the thermostat in our house was reading 43 degrees. We lost water yesterday. And so it's just been a dogfight. And but I have a bunch of sons, as many of you know, and they do not have a clue what's going on. So they're from ages 13 to 14 months, and we know that we had to sleep in our master bedroom closet, and it was an interesting experience, and I certainly hope we never have to do it again. But I'm grateful to have my family with me to try and take advantage this week to bond and connect. And also just grateful that we did not experience more damage in our house, because a lot of folks in Texas are really, really struggling. But optimistic about what we're going to talk about today, and glad that we can be on this call this morning. So thank y'all very much. So I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves before we get into the rest of the meeting, and I will start out first with Tamara.
Hey y'all, good morning. I am Tamara Melton. I am the co-founder and executive director of Diversified Dietetics. We are a nonprofit that is dedicated to increasing the diversity in the field of nutrition and dietetics. And my co-founder, my esteemed co-founder, is also on the panel today, Deanna Bellany-Lewis, so she will introduce herself. And I am based in Atlanta, so we got a little bit of dusting, but I think we got our hit a few years ago. So we are feeling for our brothers and sisters over there in Texas, because we definitely remember what that is like. And who I am grateful for, I'm also grateful for my family. Because of this week, we did have some ice and things like that. I have a 7 and 8-year-old daughter, and my husband also works here within the home. And it was a lot of juggling and moving around. I just had the 7-year-old pop in and pop back out. She like backed away because she knew mommy's on a webinar. They do a really good job in they're getting better at letting us do kind of our work in these spaces that just used to be living spaces. So going on 12 months of this, I just am really grateful for my family and support system, who have just been really flexible in this whole pandemic, and thankful for IMC for this invitation to be able to talk on this really important topic today.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Deanna.
Great, thank you. It's so great to meet you all. My name is Deanna Bellany-Lewis. As was mentioned, I'm currently based in Hartford, Connecticut, but originally from Texas. So my heart definitely goes out to all my friends and family there. I am the co-founder of Diversified Dietetics, as Tamara mentioned. I also work at Harvard Medical School Center for Primary Care as their assistant director for health systems transformation. But my love in life has always been around diversity, equity, inclusion, particularly in historically underserved communities. And so I'm really excited to be talking about this topic today. I am grateful. I hate to jump on the family bandwagon, but I'm going to jump on it as well and say, my husband, it's been just the two of us throughout quarantine. And so just, having a partner that's been flexible. We've moved from Boston and stayed some months in Texas, and then moved here to Hartford, so there's just been a lot of transitions, and so we've had each other as stability over the last year, I guess. So definitely grateful for him and happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Cordialis.
Hi, good morning. I am Cordialis Musora Casago, and I am the founder of the African Pot Nutrition, which is a nutrition consultancy that helps people of African descent eat well and beat chronic diseases while enjoying their cultural foods, which are often excluded when we talk about a healthy plate. I am based in California, when I'm thankful for the weather right now, and my heart goes out to people in Houston and on the East Coast where the weather has not been so great. And, also on the family bandwagon, but I'll pivot a little bit because in my other life, I do work in hospitals, supporting hospitals on the East Coast, the West Coast. And COVID has hit hard. And many of us know people that have been impacted, that have lost loved ones, but I'm just grateful that in my family, in our little isolation bubble, we have not had COVID hit us as a family, although we've had loved ones that have had it. So I'm just grateful for the gift of good health.
Thank you very much, Cordialis. And Bashida.
Good morning, I'm Bashira Anahora, and I'm the owner and founder of Be Nutrition, which is a private practice dedicated to helping women and particularly women of color to lead healthy lives and achieve their best health while not feeling restricted. And I also teach as an adjunct professor at Johnson C. Smith University as well. And I would say, I guess what I'm grateful for is to have not been, I guess, extremely affected by the pandemic. I think we're all affected in some way, but to be able to stay financially viable, to be in a warm home, and to be in good health, to wake up every morning and not have to worry about those things has been truly a blessing that I'm grateful for. And I'm grateful to be here too. So thank you for the invite and for having this morning.
Absolutely, and thank you all very much for the time this morning, and looking forward to the conversation. All right, so a couple logistical items here is, hopefully everyone, and I believe they have gotten the message. So all of our attendees, if you could turn off your video, that would be great. We should only see the panelists' videos. Please feel free to chat any questions throughout this morning's conversation. We will be monitoring those chats and making sure that we address all those questions. And we will certainly, we are already recording this webinar, and a link to the recording will be sent to all the invitees. And we will also post a link to the recording on the IMC Culture website. And then from an objective standpoint, and so the reason why we host these is that we certainly want to make sure that we're giving you some additional insights to support your ongoing strategic planning efforts, because all the folks that were invited to this session, the information that we're going to talk about is relevant and may actually support some of the work that y'all are currently doing. And we also just want to give you some real tactical actions that you may be able to take tomorrow or next week. We certainly pride ourselves at IMC in being able to give our clients and the folks that we work with things that we can do immediately. Yes, we're always thinking 3 to 5 years out, but we also believe that the power is in taking action as quickly as possible. So those are the objectives for today's session. All right, we have a few slides that we'll go through, and actually tomorrow I'll have you walk us through some of this background information on kind of the state of registered dietitians and dietetics.
Sure, thank you, Benjamin. So this was data that I actually pulled last night from the Commission on Dietetic Registration. And if you were to go to that site, they have this data presented as a pie chart and maybe even a line graph. But I think having it presented this way just shows how little diversity we do have in our profession, that it is about greater majority, 84% of RDNs as of last night were white dietitians. And you can see that the numbers are just not representative and the other race and ethnicity groups with the US population. And so what that means for us as a profession in serving literally everyone, because everyone can eat, is that we don't have enough folks in our profession to even be able to provide the resources, even just the materials to create for all of the communities that we serve. And so this is always a really sobering chart to me, this data, but it also is very invigorating just to say that there's more efforts that we can put into diversifying our profession and more efforts that can be done in diversifying it. But I think sometimes folks have heard this, but they haven't seen the actual data in front of them. So it's always good, I think, just to check in on this. This is available. You can Google this and find this data at any point in time. It is real time.
Good stuff. Thank you.
And so this information here is interesting because if we are looking at our profession is not one of those where if you just decide one day, whoa, I want to become a dietitian, you can't just go somewhere and put your name up as an RD. You actually have to go through a very structured educational pathway. And so it's important to look at the pipeline to see who's coming, to see what's going to be the profession in the future. And so this is looking at, since 2000, what do the students look like who are in all dietetics programs? So this is undergraduate programs as well as dietetic internships, any accredited program. And you can see here that blue line in the top are white non-Hispanic students. So it has stayed up there in the above 10,000 and sometimes over 15,000 since 2000. We haven't lost the students. We've seen it come down. That did happen for all students and all, I should say all programs, just because of the economy was better. We saw that before COVID. But if you go to the next slide, because everything down there was so small, I decided to really zoom in on this because you couldn't see the effect of this. So this is when we just look at students of color. So this is them from 2000 until about 2020. This data is going to, 2019, Ascend data has gone through. And you'll see here that we've seen some gains, especially for Hispanic Latino students, as Asian Pacific Islander as well. Unfortunately, we've seen basically flatline for our American Indian or Alaskan, our Native students, and we have continued to see, unfortunately, since about 2011, 2012, a downward trend in African American students, or Black students. So there's absolutely some work to be done if we want to actually diversify the profession when we look at the pipeline itself.
Good stuff. And so yeah, thank you for walking us through that, Tamar. And I'll actually stop sharing my screen to give us a bigger view of the panelists today. And seeing that we have a ways to go before representation in dietetics programs or registered dietitians that are practicing will change. I would love to kind of get y'all's thoughts on, what are some maybe bright spots, and where are some other focus areas that we need to really hone in on to help move the needle. And I may start with you, Tamara, and then go to you, Cordialis, on that.
So I think some bright spots have been just the fact that more people are aware of this. So I think that it was kind of the worst kept secret in our profession itself. If you went to any of our conferences or anything like that, it was quite obvious that we do not have a lot of diversity there. But it wasn't until recently, probably within the last 12 months, I would say, that it has become more obvious to the rest of the outside public, if you will, consumers of our services as nutrition professionals. And that means something. Now that means that there's more interest and more demand from consumers saying, look, we want to have more representation and more culturally sensitive care from this very important profession. So to me, that actually is a bright spot, just having more awareness around this issue.
Okay.
And I agree with Tamara. I think the awareness has been very important, but not just awareness in the public's eyes or within our profession, but it's also forced us to do a lot of introspective insights. It's like we talk about unconscious bias, and having people become conscious of those unconscious biases and looking at their personal blind spots or maybe their beliefs about certain population groups or their food habits and how those might impact how they interact with clients and different individuals. So I think we are having a lot more of these very important and yet very difficult conversations while trying to move the needle in terms of improving health, improving care, and helping the people that we serve achieve health.
Got it. And Bashir, your thoughts?
I would agree. I have definitely, in the last 12 months here in North Carolina, have been able to speak on at certain conferences and in certain webinars, or even just there's an outpouring of wanting more information and wanting to do some of the work. I feel like some eyes have been open. We still have a long way to go, but at least people are having some of those tough conversations and recognizing some of their privileges and wanting to work through some of that uncomfortableness.
Got it. Got it. And Deanna.
Yeah, so I of course agree with all that our panelists have said thus far. In Diversified Dietetics, we talk a lot about shaking up the status quo, and I think that has happened on a much larger level, like challenging what has been the status quo in our field for so long, and I see it happening in other fields as well. And if you think about the demographics, that doesn't only impact, of course, us as dietitians and our consumers, but you think about who's creating curriculum, who's passing policies and laws that are impacting these communities. And so if there's no diversity within the professions, there's no diversity in those sort of curriculum creation, systemic impact that we can make as well. And so I was in a classroom with a few other folks that I was speaking with at a student level, and they were questioning why the Mediterranean diet is so heavily enforced in our education. So I think this sort of challenging of all the things that we've kind of said, yes, this is the norm, this is what we go with, this is what we say as dietitians, is really being pushed in a way that's been really exciting to see.
Got it. And so, the title of this webinar is, enhancing our cultural sensitivity. Would also love to get y'all's thoughts as a non-registered dietitian, right? I was a biology major in undergrad, if that counts for anything. But I would like to get y'all's thoughts on, what does cultural insensitivity look like, in dietetics? And then what are some recommendations or thoughts that y'all have on how to address that or prevent those cultural insensitivities from manifesting? And I'm actually start with you, Deanna, and then work my way around the table again.
So for me, and I will have the disclaimer that I haven't done one-on-one patient care in a while, but so I think about this sometimes just more so on the public health level. But for me, cultural insensitivity looks like not centering a patient's voice or not centering a community or population's voice. We're taught that we are the nutrition experts, but that doesn't make us experts on everything. And so not being able to listen and hear and have your patient or client or populations teach you is something that's, I think, insensitive and not necessarily being a great practitioner, if I'm honest. And I think about myself coming out of my dietetics degree, and there's a term that I learned over the summer called professional socialization, where you're socialized to talk about certain things just because, again, it's a part of the education. And so I remember going into these Black and brown communities with my, kale smoothies and my quinoa and all these things that I was really taught that, like, this is how you educate with nutrition in communities. And it wasn't respectful of those communities, and it wasn't respectful of like the perspective that they were bringing to the table and what they were wanting to center. So I think one way that cultural insensitivity shows up is not being aware of what your clients or communities or patients experiences are, and not letting that play a role in how you communicate with them.
Got it. Thank you. Basira.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with Deanna. I think it's not being open and receptive when you're in front of someone to what their experiences are, not fully hearing them. I think oftentimes we may be listening, but we're not really hearing someone and what their life experiences are and how that impacts them, both from a nutrition perspective, from a financial perspective, from a social perspective. One of the things that I always try to do is to gather someone's total experience, not just, what does their health history look like, but what is their family dynamic? What is their work dynamic? Particularly as I work with teens, what is the family unit look like? Really understanding all of that, and not passing my perspective onto their experiences or anyone's perspective. I think listening and hearing means you're keeping an open mind as you're gathering that information and not passing any sorts of, preconceived notions or judgment on what that person is telling you. And then I think it's also about, as you're thinking about that person's health and well-being, it is being able to work with them and meet them where they are oftentimes, which may not really be a substantial amount of change per se, but building that trust that you got their best interests at heart and that you are putting them first when it comes to their health may just be taking some really small steps in moving them forward. I think part of that is listening, understanding, and building that trust first before some larger, grander change may happen down the line.
Got it. Thank you for that. Cordialis.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull from my experience as an immigrant and being a dietitian that's of immigrant background and a minority at that point. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and part of the reason I started my nutrition consultancy was because I didn't see my foods. I'm like, where is the pumpkin leaves? Why do we not talk about those when we talk about what healthy eating looks like, right? And part of it, as I work with different people, what I often hear are the stories that they have heard through the media or their friends, and that nobody ever talks about the cassavas, or some people might say taro, or those different foods that are of African heritage. And I think part of the role of the registered dietitian is helping break down those misconceptions and validating to somebody that your food is healthy, your food fits, and your food plays a part in shaping your health. And so the role of the registered dietitian is to be able to communicate that and ask the individual, the client, well, how does that look? If you don't understand, if I say I'm eating sadza, okay, well, what is sadza? Help me understand how you make it. Okay, you might not understand what it is, but when I say I make it from cornmeal, oh, okay, I know about corn, and having those conversations rather than saying, what is it? And okay, don't eat it. Instead, have this, don't eat sadza, which is a staple food made from cornmeal, as I said, and asking them to substitute it with something like quinoa. I think we hear so many of those stories as minority dietitians that people have been told to not eat a certain food, maybe because the practitioner did not understand, number one, its cultural significance, and number two, what it was as a food. So I think breaking that down, but also in the larger picture, I think that there is a need for more inclusivity within the profession, having more people coming to the table and having discussions such as these so that people can learn from each other and having wider discussions on various topics.
Got it. Thank you very much. Tamara.
So I'm going to come from an educator's perspective because that's my background and my history. There have been times with diversified dietetics, we've talked to students and students working with preceptors or with their professors, our future professionals, our future colleagues, and they have experienced cultural insensitivity from their professors or their preceptors. And that's a major issue. We have seen that we have these really bright stars. We just looked at the data of the numbers of why we need more students coming into the profession. And some of these folks have just had such not good experiences. They're so disillusioned by their colleagues and the treatment that they've had from them because those colleagues, like Deanna alluded to, we're told that we're the experts. And when we're put in this position where we are a professor or we're a preceptor of dietetic interns, it's often not thought that we're learning from our interns. The best preceptors are the ones, and the best professors are the ones who realize that you also can learn from your students. And I'm just going to tell one quick story that we had. It's just seared in my brain from a student who is, she went to school in Manhattan, and she's Dominican. She is Black, so she's of African descent. There's a lot of people throughout the world, it's just the slave trade or colonialism, that are Black. And she said that in her foods and cultures course, this is the irony of it, the very course where you're learning about foods and cultures, her teacher looked at her one day when they were studying soul food and asked her, how does she cook her greens? And she said to her, I don't cook greens. And she said, but you're Black. And so just that point is so seared in that student's brain. It's seared in my brain now, that there are times where there's cultural insensitivity happening to our colleagues, to future colleagues. And that is really an area that I think we're working on creating resources for that in the Diversified Dietetics through our resources. But I think it's something that we don't talk about enough, and not talking about just the fact that we do have some colleagues who are amongst our ranks that we can be looking to, realizing that sometimes we're not the best person to be working with this client or patient. Maybe we need to have somebody else come in and work with them. If that person doesn't physically work with us, do we know somebody we can pick up the phone and call or text or something like that? And that way we can reduce those incidences of, even if it's unconscious bias, but having those situations where we might be causing harm to someone, be it a client, a student, a patient, because of just not having enough resources or just relying too much on ourselves, not being humble enough to say, maybe I need to raise my hand and you might actually be more of the expert in this area, even though I have all the letters after my name.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so I heard as, there's a need to make sure that we're capturing the total history whenever we're working with, our clients or a group of folks, particularly in the Black and Brown communities. I also heard that, the need to kind of meet, folks where they are, and understanding that, some of y'all's training that y'all have received, it may be different than where people are currently, how they're preparing their meals. I also heard that, as clinical experts, spending the time to kind of break down the misconceptions around some of the dietary habits of the folks that you're all working with. And then also heard from you, Tamara, is that acknowledging kind of, the lack of maybe representation. There's nothing wrong with maybe bringing in experts to work with particular groups that may be, kind of better equipped to handle those conversations and guide folks. Okay. And that actually, kind of leads me to the next thing I would like to kind of pick your brain on. I don't know if my university colleagues were able to join, but would love to hear from y'all, understanding that we still have a ways to go in terms of improving representation. From y'all's perspective, what should and could dietetics programs do to increase the cultural sensitivity of not just people of color students, but all of their students, and particularly, maybe Caucasian students that have not been exposed to some of the things in the Black and Brown communities. So this one, I'm going to start with Cordialis. I'm going to go zigzag on my screen. So I go with you, Cordialis, then I'm going to go to Deanna, then I'm going to go to Basira, and then I'm going to wrap up with you, Tamara.
Okay. Tamara's story is now ingrained in my head, because I'm thinking of this particular student. And unfortunately, it's something that happens quite often. People make assumptions based off of the color of your skin or what you look like. You're Black, therefore you must eat soul food. But that's not always the case. Most dietitians agree that we were taught about cultural foods in this one specific class, foods and cultures around the world. And I think it's a good class, but maybe restructuring that conversation. One of the things that COVID has taught us is how to use technology efficiently. And as I think about the future of education, and particularly the future of that class, having a panel discussion with people from different backgrounds and talking about those particular experiences, I think brings a lot to the classroom, such that if I am a student and I am there, and I'm just going to go ahead and use Tamara and I as an example, Tamara, I hope you don't mind me saying, her father is from Trinidad and grew up eating Trini food. I am Black, but I don't know about roti. I learned it from Tamara, right? And so having those discussions that food looks different across different ethnicities, across different races, and that's okay. And having the conversation of how we now interact with our students and our patients and help them achieve that health that they're looking for. But also along the same lines, I think the conversation to what Deanna said, when we talk about education, needs to broaden. We can't achieve our outcomes if we are not engaged in public policy. because I think that drives a lot of what we do as dietitians. So having more engagement in those areas, because I think it puts us in the seat of the larger population so that we understand what their challenges are and we are advocating for some of the changes that need to happen in order for them to achieve health.
Thank you, Deanna.
Yeah. So I wholeheartedly agree. And I think back to my undergraduate experience, and I don't think I saw a dietitian of color until I started my dietetic internship. So that's after 4 years of undergraduate school. Never had the opportunity to meet another dietitian of color. And so I think that representation, either through bringing outside voices into the classroom, is very important. Looking at, you know, the demographic breakdown of your professors and of the staff that are working within the system as well is important to look at, and recognizing that, you know, if this is something that you really want to move the needle on, your recruitment policies and your recruitment kind of strategies that you've used thus far might not be enough. Like, you might need to go above and beyond to make sure you're recruiting more diverse teachers into your academic setting. And then from the student perspective, you know, I think that, of course, in dietetics, there is a lot of, you know, science and chemistry and biology where there's just like things you need to learn and memorize. But there's also more opportunities to provide critical thinking and to have discussions with other students, like Cordialis was talking about, that I think some educational programs are doing. But if I think back to my own experience, there wasn't the critical thinking. And I think race intersects with so many other topics, with food and culture and policy and education. And so there's so many opportunities to really have people critically think about their personal identity and what kind of practitioner they're going to be based on their experiences, and what other things they might need to pull on or expose themselves to kind of broaden out their perspective. So I think those are some other ways that we could challenge education and educators to think bigger.
I love it. I love it. Bashir.
Gosh, where to start? We have such a long way to go. You know, I think it could start even as early as you know, middle school and high school. I don't think that students of color get the exposure that they need to more kind of science, math science type careers. And dietetics definitely is a very heavy science path, where we could start at the high school level of having more of those critical thinking type of conversations. I think at that level, a lot of what I see with young people is they are following these extremes. And I think that can have a very negative impact on their health. So they're, you know, trying to follow these extreme diets. There's just so much pervasive media around, like, health has to be this extreme that is really the opposite of health. So I think having conversations at the high school level can even help. I agree that at the college level, what the makeup of the faculty looks like can really be impactful on a student's experience. And if the faculty isn't diverse, that can be very challenging for a student to feel like they just have a safe space as they're matriculating through their program. So universities, colleges and universities definitely have to make an effort to recruit more faculty of color. But then also, as individuals of color, we've got to be willing then to go into the academic arena and to teach and to mentor as well. So that's a tough question to answer in one simple way. I think that, you know, all of those areas, those factors matter. And we kind of have to chip away at all of them collectively to continue to move the needle forward.
Got it. And I hear you on that. It is a multifaceted, you know, comprehensive, complex solution, right? There is no silver bullet on this. And so we have to think about all of these. Tamara.
And I will give Bashir, she practices what she preaches because she is in a PhD program right now to teach. So she's absolutely, because I was never going to do a terminal degree. So I got to get, I just couldn't do that in all my teaching. So we know that it's a supply and demand situation right now, right? There's going to be a lot of time before we get representation in our profession for the communities that we serve. Outside of that, every single one of us who are dietetics professionals are going to work with people who are not from our same background. That's just, we need to have the skills to be able to work with people from all backgrounds. So I think that it's an exciting time if you are someone who's either a faculty member or a preceptor to look at your curriculum and to say, can I weave into Foods and Cultures course? I agree with Cordialis, is a great course, but every single class should have this topic in there. There should be conversations about this in every single course. There should be conversations about what's the considerations for this client, for this patient, for this program, for this policy, for whatever, having as a consideration always as top of mind, how is this affecting people from different backgrounds? It should be in every single course. That way, when all students graduate, when they get out of their programs, when they sit for the exam, they feel like they're really well equipped no matter who ends up sitting in front of them, no matter who comes up on the screen, when they're doing a virtual consult with them, no matter who they're teaching, they're ready to go because in every single course, their professors have had it top of mind, their preceptors have had it top of mind, because we all need to be equipped to work with people